The water from the shower head hit my back with enough force to wash away the soot and smoke, but not the memory of today's fire. 3 kids nearly didn't make it out of that house on Maple Street. I closed my eyes, letting the scalding water run down my face, trying to push away the image of their terrified expressions when I carried them out one by one. Saving lives never got old, but the fear in those little eyes, that part still haunted me. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear Laura come home. It wasn't until I stepped out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around my waist, that I noticed her sitting on our bed, scrolling through her phone with unusual intensity. Her fingers moved quickly, and I caught a glimpse of what looked like a text conversation before she quickly flipped the phone screen down. "Hey, babe," I said, leaning down to kiss her. She flinched and quickly locked her screen. "Mark, you startled me." That was the 3rd time this week I'd caught her guarding her phone like it contained nuclear launch codes. Something was off, but between my 48-hour shifts at the station and the wedding planning, I hadn't had the mental bandwidth to address it. "Rough day?" she asked, not quite meeting my eyes, a nervous edge to her voice I hadn't heard before. "Yeah, house fire on Maple. Got everyone out, but it was close." I pulled on a pair of jeans and a clean t-shirt, watching her in the mirror as I dressed. Her eyes kept darting to her phone. The youngest was maybe 4, reminded me of your student, Tommy, the one with the dinosaur obsession. Usually that would have made her smile, launch into a story about her 2nd graders. Instead, she just nodded distractedly. "How were the Rugrats today?" I pressed, a sinking feeling growing in my stomach. Laura taught 2nd grade at Asheville Elementary. Usually she'd launch into animated stories about her students' latest antics. But lately, she'd been strangely subdued. "Fine, nothing special." She stood up abruptly, almost knocking over the bedside lamp. "I'm going to take a bath." Before I could respond, she had grabbed her phone and disappeared into the bathroom. The click of the lock echoed in our bedroom like a gunshot. I sat on the edge of the bed, a knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't Laura, my Laura, who used to curl up next to me after rough shifts and listen for hours while I processed the day. The woman who'd proposed to me after our hike up to Looking Glass Rock last year, getting down on one knee with a vintage watch instead of a ring because she knew I'd appreciate the symbolism of time spent together more than diamonds. I glanced at the bathroom door, hearing the water running and faintly the sound of her voice. She was on the phone, in the bathroom, with the door locked. Something had changed, and as much as I wanted to attribute it to wedding stress, my gut told me it was more than that. The question was, did I want to know what? "Have you talked to her about it?" Jake asked, handing me a beer as we sat on his back deck overlooking the mountains that gave Asheville its postcard appeal. The sunset painted them gold and crimson, but I barely noticed. Jake had been my best friend since our rookie days at the fire station, and he never sugarcoated anything. He'd been there through everything: my parents' messy divorce, my brother's stint in rehab, the day I nearly died in a warehouse collapse. If anyone would give me straight talk, it was him. Every time I try, she changes the subject or says everything's fine. I took a long pull from the bottle, feeling the cold beer slide down my throat. She's constantly checking her phone, going into other rooms to take calls. Last night, she was texting someone at 2 a.m. "You check her phone messages?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "No, I woke up and she was on the balcony typing away. When I asked who she was talking to, she said it was her mother having an anxiety attack." I shook my head. I called her mom the next day to check in, and she had no idea what I was talking about. Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, the beer bottle dangling between his fingers. "You think she's cheating?" The word hit me like a sucker punch, making the world tilt momentarily. "I don't know. I don't want to believe it." "Look, man, Laura's great, but you need to face this head on. The wedding's in what, 3 months? Better to know now than after." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. The thought of confronting Laura made my stomach churn, but the alternative, marrying someone who might be emotionally checked out, was worse. "What if I'm wrong?" I asked quietly. "What if it's just wedding stress or work stuff, and I come off like a paranoid, controlling asshole?" Jake set his beer down with a decisive thunk. "Then she'll tell you that. You'll talk it through, and you'll both be better for it. But what if you're right? Do you really want to wonder every time she takes a call in another room for the next 40 years? The image of that future, a life of suspicion and doubt, made my decision clear. I'll talk to her tonight, I promised. But when I got home, Laura was already asleep, or pretending to be. Her phone was tucked under her pillow, just visible in the dim light from the hallway. I stood in the doorway for a long moment watching the rise and fall of her chest, wondering when we'd started keeping secrets. For a wild moment, I considered taking the phone, checking her messages. But that wasn't me. That wasn't us. Or at least, it hadn't been. Instead, I slept on the couch, telling myself it was because I didn't want to wake her. But the truth was, I couldn't bear to lie next to her and pretend everything was normal. The next morning over breakfast, I tried again. Laura was already dressed for work, hair pulled back in the neat ponytail she wore for teaching, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. "Laura, we need to talk." She looked up from her toast, a flash of panic crossing her face before she composed herself. "About what?" "About whatever's going on with you. You're distant. You're secretive with your phone. You barely talk to me anymore." I took a deep breath. "And you're lying to me." Her coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. "Lying? What are you talking about?" "Your mom didn't have an anxiety attack the other night. I called to check on her." The color drained from her face, then rushed back in a guilty flush. "You checked up on me? What, are you spying on me now?" "Don't flip this around," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger bubbling up. "I was worried about your mom. You made up a story instead of telling me the truth. So I'll ask you once, what's going on?" She sighed, pushing her plate away. "It's just wedding stress, Mark, and work's been crazy with end-of-year evaluations coming up." "Is that all it is?" I pressed, hating how insecure I sounded. "What else would it be?" Her tone was defensive, her eyes darting to the clock on the wall like a trapped animal looking for escape. "I'm going to be late. We can talk tonight." She was out the door before I could respond, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and growing doubts. But not before I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She'd taken off her engagement watch, the one she normally never removed. It sat on the counter by the sink, face down, like she'd discarded it without thought. 2 weeks passed in this strange limbo. Laura started staying late at school, claiming parent conferences and committee meetings. When I drove by one evening to surprise her with dinner, her classroom was dark, her car gone. The school security guard said she'd left hours ago. I threw myself into work, volunteering for extra shifts to avoid coming home to an empty house, or worse, to the stranger my fiancé had become. The guys at the station noticed, but most had the sense not to ask, except Davis, the newest and youngest on our crew, who still believed in happy endings. "Trouble in paradise?" he asked one night as we cleaned the equipment after a call. "Mind your business, rookie," Jake snapped before I could answer. "It's fine," I said, though it clearly wasn't. "Just wedding planning stress. It'll pass." Davis nodded, obviously not believing me, but smart enough to drop it. Later, as we were heading to our bunks, he stopped me. "My sister's getting married next month," he said. "She turned into a completely different person for a while. Stressed about centerpieces and guest lists, snapped at everyone. But she came around, so I appreciated the kid's attempt at reassurance, but he was describing normal wedding jitters, not whatever was happening with Laura. Still, I clapped him on the shoulder. "Thanks, man. I'm sure it'll work out." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it was easier than the truth. Then came the text that changed everything. "Dinner tonight, just the two of us. Antonio's at 7, we need to talk." Antonio's was where we'd had our first date. The fact that she'd chosen it sent mixed signals. Was this a romantic gesture, or was she picking neutral ground for bad news? I spent the day in a fog of anxiety, barely able to focus during training drills. At one point, Chief Reynolds pulled me aside. "Your head's not in it today, Thomas. Want to tell me why?" I respected Reynolds too much to lie to him. "Personal stuff, Chief. I'll get it sorted." He studied me with eyes that had seen everything in 30 years of service. "Family trouble's the hardest kind. Take the rest of the day. Deal with whatever it is. I need you at 100% when you're here." By the time I showered and changed at the station, my hands were shaking slightly as I buttoned my shirt. "You look like you're heading to your own funeral," remarked Davis, watching me from his locker. "Maybe I am," I muttered, but forced a smile. "Just dinner with the fiancé." Lucky man, he said, completely missing the tension in my voice. I arrived at Antonio's 10 minutes early, claiming our usual corner table with the view of the mountains. Old Enzo, the owner, came over personally to pour me a glass of the house red. "Where's your beautiful lady?" he asked, glancing at the empty seat across from me. "On her way," I said, hoping it was true. Part of me wondered if she'd even show up. But Laura walked in at 7:05, wearing a dress I didn't recognize and looking more nervous than I had ever seen her. Her hair was styled differently too, soft waves instead of her usual straight cut. It was a look I'd never seen on her, and the realization that she might have changed it for someone else hit me like a physical blow. "You look beautiful," I said as she sat down, because despite everything, she did. "Thanks." She fidgeted with her napkin, not meeting my eyes. I noticed she still wasn't wearing her engagement watch. We ordered wine, and Laura took a large gulp as soon as it arrived. The waiter had barely left when she blurted out, "Travis is back in town." The name hit me like a bucket of ice water. Travis Hamilton, Laura's college boyfriend, the one she'd dated for 4 years before moving to Asheville. The one she'd once described as the wild ride that eventually crashed. "Okay," I said carefully, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. "And why does that matter?" "He reached out to me a few weeks ago, just to catch up at first." Her fingers traced the stem of her wine glass, round and round in hypnotic circles. "But we've been talking. A lot." My chest tightened. "Talking?" "Yes, and meeting up sometimes, for coffee." The room seemed to tilt slightly, the ambient restaurant noise fading to a distant hum. "You've been meeting your ex-boyfriend for coffee and didn't think to mention it to me?" "I didn't know how to tell you. I knew you'd be upset." "I'm upset because you hid it, Laura, not because you had coffee with someone." Even as I said it, I knew it was a half-truth. The secrecy was bad, but the thought of her reconnecting with Travis was its own special kind of torture. She took another drink, then looked me directly in the eyes for the first time that evening. "There's more to it, Mark." The waiter approached with bread, but I waved him off so violently he nearly dropped the basket. "What more?" "Being around Travis again, it's brought up a lot of feelings. Feelings I thought were gone." I sat perfectly still, my body seemingly unable to move while my mind raced ahead, anticipating what was coming next. Around us, couples were laughing, clinking glasses, sharing tiramisu. Normal people having normal dinners, while my world was collapsing inward like a dying star. With him, I feel this passion, this excitement, like life is an adventure. Her words tumbled out faster now, as if she'd rehearsed this speech but was now rushing through it. "And with you, it's different. It's safe and secure and boring," I supplied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the grenade she'd just lobbed into our relationship. "Not boring, just predictable, comfortable." She reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled back as if her touch might burn me. "Mark, I love you. I do. But seeing Travis again has made me wonder if I settled too soon. If I gave up on something electric for something reliable." The restaurant noise faded to a dull roar in my ears. 5 years together, a home, wedding plans, all of it reduced to reliable, like I was a sensible sedan instead of the man she'd chosen to spend her life with. "So what are you saying exactly?" I needed her to spell it out, to own whatever decision she was making. "I don't know." Tears welled in her eyes, making them shine in the candlelight. "I'm confused. Part of me wonders what would have happened if I'd given Travis another chance back then, instead of walking away." A cold clarity settled over me, like the moment after jumping into icy water when shock gives way to sharp focus. "Let me make this simple for you, Laura. If you think he's better for you, the door's wide open. But you don't get to keep me as your safety net while you figure it out." "That's not fair," she protested, her voice rising enough that a couple at the next table glanced over. "I'm just being honest about my feelings." "No, what's not fair is hiding your coffee dates from me for weeks. What's not fair is sitting across from your fiancé and telling him another man makes you feel more alive." My voice remained low but had taken on an edge I barely recognized. "I deserve better than to be your backup plan." "You're twisting my words." Her tears spilled over now, tracking mascara down her cheeks. "I never said you were a backup plan. You didn't have to." I placed my napkin on the table and signaled for the check. I think we're done here. Mark, please, can we just talk about this? I'm trying to be honest with you. Your honesty is a few weeks too late. The waiter dropped the check, and I placed my credit card on the tray without looking at the total. So here's some honesty from me. If he's what you want, go get him, but not from my house and not while wearing my watch. Her face crumpled. Are you breaking up with me? I'm giving you what you asked for, the freedom to find out if the grass is greener with Travis. But I won't be waiting around to see how that works out for you. That's not what I want, she insisted. But her protest sounded hollow, even to her own ears, judging by the way she flinched at her own words. What do you want, Laura? Because it sounds like you want to explore things with Travis while keeping me on standby. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Can't we just take some time, a break to figure things out? I laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. A break so you can test drive Travis while I sit at home waiting to see if I measure up? That's not happening. The waiter returned with my card and I signed the receipt quickly, adding a tip larger than necessary to compensate for the drama he'd witnessed. I'll be staying at Jake's tonight. I expect you'll need some time to pack your things. You're kicking me out, just like that? Her voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. The house is in my name, I reminded her quietly. And yes, just like that. The same way you've apparently been reconsidering our entire relationship. Just like that. I stood up, feeling strangely calm despite the earthquake that had just destroyed the future I'd planned. I'll text you when I'm heading to work tomorrow. You can come by then to get your stuff without us having to see each other. As I walked away, I heard her call my name, her voice breaking. I didn't turn around. The cool evening air hit me as I stepped outside, and I took a deep breath, trying to process what had just happened. The hostess caught my eye as I passed. Everything okay, sir? No, I answered honestly, but it will be. My phone buzzed with a text. Laura, please come back. Let's talk about this. I turned off my phone and drove to Jake's, the world blurring around me. The news spread through our small community like wildfire. By noon the next day, it seemed everyone knew that Mark Thomas and Laura Bennett were no longer getting married. The story varied depending on who was telling it. Some said I'd caught her cheating. Others claimed we'd had a dramatic public breakup at Antonio's. I ignored the calls and texts, focusing instead on the practical aspects of dismantling our life together. I contacted the venue, the caterer, the photographer. Each cancellation was another nail in the coffin of what I'd thought would be my future. You sure you don't want to wait a few days? Jake asked as I hung up with the bakery. Give yourself time to cool off, maybe talk it through. There's nothing to talk through, I said, deleting the wedding planning app from my phone. She's not sure about us. That's all I need to know. People get cold feet, man. It happens. I looked up at him, feeling 10 years older than I had yesterday. This isn't cold feet. She's actively questioning whether she should be with me or her ex. That's not something you work through with a heart-to-heart and a good night's sleep. Jake couldn't argue with that. He handed me another beer and sat quietly beside me as I methodically erased the wedding plans we had spent months making. My phone rang again. Laura, for the 12th time. I let it go to voicemail. You should talk to her eventually, Jake said, even if it's just to get closure. I have closure, I said, staring at her name on my screen. She wanted out, and now she is. But even as I said it, I knew I'd have to face her again. We had a house full of shared possessions, 5 years of entangled lives. Breaking up wasn't as simple as walking out of a restaurant. When my phone rang again an hour later, it wasn't Laura, but her friend Megan. I hesitated, then answered, Mark, what the hell? Megan's voice was sharp with accusation. Laura's a mess. She says you broke up with her at Antonio's and kicked her out? That's one version of the story, I said, feeling a fresh wave of anger. Did she tell you why? She said you overreacted to her being honest about some feelings. I laughed bitterly. Yeah, feelings for her ex-boyfriend that she's been secretly meeting for weeks. Feelings that made her wonder if she made a mistake being with me. There was a long pause on the other end. Oh. Yeah, oh. She didn't mention that part. Somehow I'm not surprised. Megan's tone softened. I'm sorry, Mark. That's messed up. Tell me about it. Do you want me to come over when she gets her stuff? Make sure things go smoothly? The offer surprised me. Megan and Laura had been friends since college. I'd always seen her as Laura's friend, not mine. You do that? Of course, you've always been good to her. And to me. She paused. And for what it's worth, I think she's making a huge mistake. After we hung up, I sat in Jake's living room, staring at the wall. Something Megan had said was bothering me. Laura was a mess. Part of me, a small, vindictive part I wasn't proud of, was glad. But another part ached at the thought of her in pain. Even now, I pushed the feeling away. Laura had made her choice. Now she had to live with it. Laura came by the house that evening, eyes red-rimmed and puffy. I just finished a shift and was bone-tired, in no state for another emotional confrontation. Megan was with her, looking uncomfortable but determined. I've packed most of your clothes and personal items, I told Laura, pointing to the boxes in the living room. Take whatever else is yours. Mark, please, can we just talk? We talked yesterday. You made yourself pretty clear. She followed me into the kitchen where I was making coffee, desperate for caffeine. No, I didn't. I was confused and I expressed it badly. I don't want to lose you. But you're not sure you want to keep me either, I countered. That's the problem, Laura. I'm sure about you, or I was. You're not sure about me. It's not that simple. Actually it is. I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted beyond the physical. Love shouldn't be this complicated. You shouldn't have to weigh the pros and cons of being with me versus someone else. So that's it? 5 years together and you're just done because I had a moment of doubt? Her framing of the situation made anger flare in my chest. A moment of doubt? You've been secretly meeting your ex for weeks, hiding your phone, lying about where you've been. Then you tell me he makes you feel alive in ways I don't. That's not a moment of doubt, Laura. That's a betrayal. I never slept with him. You didn't have to. Emotional affairs can be just as damaging. I poured my coffee, needing something to do with my hands. The bottom line is I won't be someone's second choice or safety net. I deserve better than that. And frankly, so do you. She started to cry again, and despite everything, part of me wanted to comfort her. But that would only muddy the waters. I need you to go now. Take your things and leave your key. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. My tone was harsher than I intended, but I was running on empty. Call Travis or your parents or a hotel. But you can't stay here. She stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. Maybe we'd both been strangers to each other for longer than I realized. You're being cruel, she whispered. No, I'm being clear. There's a difference. I walked past her to the front door and opened it. Goodbye, Laura. It took her an hour to gather her things, with periodic attempts to restart the conversation. I remained firm, helping her load box it into her car in silence. Megan shuttled between us, trying to keep the peace, her loyalty clearly divided. I'll call you later, she told me quietly as they prepared to leave. Make sure you're okay. I nodded, grateful for her kindness, but too drained to express it. When they finally drove away, I closed the door, slid down against it, and let the tears come at last. The next few weeks were a blur of work, awkward encounters around town, and sleepless nights. I returned the engagement gifts, losing deposits on wedding arrangements, and absorbing the financial hit without complaint. Better to lose money than years of my life in a marriage doomed from the start. My crew at the station rallied around me, covering shifts when I needed time, inviting me for meals, checking in without being overbearing. Even Laura's friends reached out, most expressing shock and sympathy. She's making a huge mistake, said Megan when she stopped by the station with cookies one afternoon. Everyone can see it. Maybe, I said, accepting the peace offering, or maybe she's finally being honest about what she wants. She doesn't know what she wants, Megan scoffed, but she's going to regret this. I shrugged, unwilling to indulge in predictions about Laura's future. I had my own to focus on. The hardest part was the nights. The house felt cavernous without her, filled with echoes of what had been. I'd catch myself reaching for her in bed, forgetting for a half second upon waking that she was gone. I started sleeping on the couch, unable to face the emptiness of my bed. Work became my salvation. I volunteered for the toughest calls, the longest shifts, If the guys noticed my new intensity, they didn't comment, until Chief Reynolds called me into his office after I'd stayed for a third consecutive 24-hour shift. "This stops now," he said without preamble. "You're going to kill yourself or someone else if you keep pushing it like this." "I'm fine, Chief." "Bullshit. You're running from something, and it's affecting your judgment. Yesterday, you went back into that apartment building after I ordered everyone out. There might have been someone still inside. The thermal scan was clear, and you knew it. You took an unnecessary risk." He leaned forward. "I get it. Your personal life's in shambles, but I won't let you use my firehouse as a place to play out some death wish." His words hit home. "I don't have a death wish." "Then start acting like it. Take some time off. Deal with your shit. Then come back ready to work." It wasn't a suggestion. I nodded, knowing he was right. "How long?" 2 weeks, minimum." He softened slightly. "Look, Thomas, you're one of my best. But right now, you're a liability. Get your head straight." 2 days into my forced vacation, I was already climbing the walls. Jake found me in my garage at 7 a.m., dismantling and cleaning every tool I owned. "Get dressed," he said, tossing a duffel bag at me. "We're going somewhere." "I'm busy." "You're avoiding. There's a difference." He looked around at the meticulous rows of screwdrivers and wrenches. "This isn't healthy, man." "Neither is sitting around thinking about Laura. So don't think about her. Come with me instead." Jake drove us to a cabin tucked away in the mountains where the cell service was non-existent, and the only sounds were birds and rustling leaves. For 3 days, we hiked, chopped wood, and ate whatever we managed to cook over an open fire. At night, we sat on the porch with beers, talking about everything except Laura, until the last night when Jake finally asked the question I'd been dreading. "You doing okay with all this? Really?" I stared at the silhouettes of the mountains against the starry sky. "Getting there." "You know what I think?" Jake said, his voice cutting through the cricket chorus. Laura panicked. Wedding got real, commitment got real, and she grabbed the first escape hatch she could find. Travis was convenient, the road not taken. "Maybe," I conceded. "But that doesn't make it hurt any less." "No, it doesn't. But it does mean it wasn't about you being inadequate. It was about her being afraid." His words hit harder than I expected, addressing the doubt I hadn't admitted was eating at me. "Thanks for bringing me up here, man. What are best men for, even if the wedding's off?" He clinked his bottle against mine. "For what it's worth, I think you handled it with more dignity than most would have. I'd have lost my shit completely." I laughed for what felt like the first time in weeks. There's still time. 2 months after our breakup, I ran into Travis at the grocery store. He was shorter than I'd imagined, with a meticulously maintained beard and the kind of casual outfit that looks effortless but costs a fortune. He recognized me immediately, which meant Laura had shown him pictures. The thought made my stomach turn. "Mark, right?" He approached with an outstretched hand. "I'm Travis Hamilton." I considered ignoring him but decided against creating a scene in the produce section. I shook his hand briefly. "I know who you are." "Look, man, I just want to say there's no hard feelings, right?" Laura and I reconnected, but it wasn't planned. The audacity of his attempt at clearing his conscience made me laugh. "No hard feelings? You swooped in on my fiancée, and you want absolution from me? That's rich." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "It wasn't like that. We just got talking, and there was still this connection." "Save it," I cut him off. "Whatever's between you and Laura is your business now. Just do me a favor and stay out of my way in this town." I walked away, leaving my half-filled cart behind. Some groceries weren't worth the aggravation. But the encounter bothered me more than I let on. Not because of Travis himself. He seemed exactly like the type Laura had described from her college days. All surface charm and inflated ego. But because of what he represented. For 5 years, I'd believed Laura and I were solid. Unshakable. Now I wondered if she'd been comparing me to him all along, finding me wanting in ways I never suspected. The thought haunted me for days, creeping into my mind at quiet moments. Had I been enough? Had I been too safe, too predictable? Should I have been more spontaneous, more exciting? It was Davis, of all people, who snapped me out of it. We were cleaning the truck after a routine call when he noticed my distraction. You know what my dad always says? He offered without prompting. If someone makes you question your worth, they're not worthy of you. I looked at him in surprise. That's actually pretty wise. He grinned. Even rookies have their moments. Life settled into a new routine. I threw myself into work in healthier ways, earning a commendation for a particularly dangerous rescue during a flash flood. I started hiking again, something Laura had never enjoyed, but that had always centered me. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones, expanding my world beyond the narrow focus it had taken during my relationship. You're doing better than I expected, Jake commented one evening as we grilled steaks in his backyard. What did you expect? Me crying into my beer for a year? Kinda, yeah. He flipped the steaks with practiced precision. You guys were together forever. I thought it would wreck you. I considered this as I sipped my beer. It did, for a while, but then I realized something. I dodged a bullet. Imagine if she'd had these doubts after we were married, or when we had kids. True that, Jake nodded solemnly. Still sucks, though. Yeah, I agreed. It still sucks. But the truth was, it was starting to suck less. I'd repainted the house, bought new furniture, reclaimed spaces that had been ours, and made them mine. I'd started taking a cooking class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to do, but Laura had dismissed as unnecessary. I was building a life that didn't include her, and to my surprise, it was a good life. The nightmares about the fire on Maple Street had stopped too. I hadn't realized how much of my emotional energy had been going into worrying about Laura, into trying to figure out what was wrong. Now that burden was lifted, I could process the other stresses of my job more effectively. Chief Reynolds noticed the change. Whatever you did on that break, it worked, he told me after a particularly challenging rescue. You're back to being the firefighter I knew you could be. His approval meant more than I expected. Thanks, Chief. Just don't get complacent and maybe take a real vacation sometime. One that doesn't require an intervention. I laughed. Noted. 4 months after our breakup, the rumors started circulating. Travis and Laura were having problems. He was seen around town with other women. She looked miserable at school events. The Asheville gossip mill worked overtime, and despite my best efforts to stay uninformed, snippets reached me. He's moving to Atlanta, Davis told me one morning at the station. Got some job offer he couldn't refuse, apparently. I focused on checking my equipment, uninterested in the details. Good for him. Word is he didn't ask Laura to go with him. Also not my problem, I said firmly, closing the conversation. But a week later, it became my problem when Laura showed up at my door, mascara streaked down her face. What are you doing here? I asked, not inviting her in. Can I please come in, just for a minute? Her voice was thick with tears, her eyes puffy and red. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She entered cautiously, looking around at the changes I'd made to the house. New couch, rearranged furniture, my hiking photos, replacing the generic art she had preferred. You've redecorated, she observed. I've moved on, I corrected. Why are you here, Laura? She sat on the edge of the new couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Travis is moving to Atlanta. So I heard. He didn't ask me to go with him. Her voice broke. He said it was fun while it lasted, but he's not looking for anything serious right now. The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so predictable. And you're telling me this because I made a terrible mistake. She looked up at me, eye brimming with fresh tears. I threw away something real and precious for a fantasy that turned out to be exactly what it was 5 years ago, a toxic mess. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. That's unfortunate, but it's not my concern anymore. Mark, please. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. But what we had was special. We could try again. No. The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften it. We can't try again, Laura. That's not how this works. Why not? People make mistakes. They learn from them and grow. Because I deserve to be someone's first choice, I said simply. Not the safe option they come back to when the exciting one dumps them. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's honest, which is more than I can say for how you handled things between us. She stood up, moving toward me. I still love you, Mark. I never stopped. I was just confused and scared about settling down. And I'm supposed to believe that now, after everything? I stepped back, maintaining distance. Even if that were true, love isn't enough. Trust matters. Respect matters. And those things are gone. We could rebuild them. Please, just give me another chance. She reached for my hand, but I moved it away. No, I'm sorry you're hurting, but I can't be your backup plan. You're not. I am, I insisted. And we both know it. If Travis had asked you to go to Atlanta, you wouldn't be standing in my living room right now. She couldn't deny it, which confirmed everything. I think you should go, I said quietly. Mark, goodbye, Laura. This time when she left, I felt no urge to break down. Instead, there was only a sense of closure and, surprisingly, relief. The next month brought unexpected challenges. Laura seemed determined to win me back, showing up at places she knew I'd be, sending letters, leaving voicemails. It went from on to annoying to concerning. You might need to get a restraining order, Jake suggested, after she'd appeared at the station for the third time in a week. That seems extreme, I said, though privately I was starting to wonder. She's just having a hard time accepting it's over. It's been 5 months, man. That's not normal. He had a point. The situation came to a head when Laura showed up at a charity fundraiser the department was hosting. She'd clearly been drinking, her movements unsteady, as she approached me in front of several of my colleagues and their spouses. Mark, you have to talk to me, she said loudly, grabbing my arm. You can't just throw away 5 years. Laura, you're making a scene, I said quietly. This isn't the place. Where is the place? You won't answer my calls. You won't see me. Because it's over. I've told you that repeatedly. Her face hardened. It's because of her, isn't it? Her? What are you talking about? I've seen you around town with that nurse, the redhead. She was referring to Sarah Miller, a trauma nurse I'd started having coffee with occasionally after meeting her at a highway accident scene. It wasn't even dating, just friendly conversations about work and life. My friendships are none of your business, I said, trying to steer her toward the door. And you need to leave, now. So you can go back to your little girlfriend? That's why you won't give us another chance. Chief Reynolds appeared at my side, his presence commanding respect even off duty. Ms. Bennett, I think you've had too much to drink. Let me call you a cab. I don't need a cab. I need him to listen to me. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Reynolds nodded to Jake, who gently but firmly took Laura's arm. Come on, I'll take you home. I don't want to go home. I want to talk to Mark. Jake led her away despite her protests, leaving me standing there embarrassed and angry. Reynolds clapped a hand on my shoulder. Ex-fiancés, he said, with the wisdom of a twice-divorced man. They never go quietly. The incident became station gossip for a week, but soon faded as newer, more interesting dramas took its place. Laura's public meltdown seemed to have given her a wake-up call. The stalking behavior stopped. I heard through Megan that she'd started therapy and was considering a job in another district. Meanwhile, my casual coffee meetings with Sarah had indeed evolved into something more. She was different from anyone I dated before. Direct, independent, with a dark sense of humor shaped by years in emergency medicine. She didn't play games or make me guess what she was thinking. I like you, she told me bluntly on our third date. But I should warn you, I work crazy hours. I'm not great at texting back, and I snore when I'm really tired. I laughed, charmed by her honesty. I work 48-hour shifts. I sometimes wake up screaming from fire nightmares, and I'm still getting over a bad breakup. Sounds like we're both disasters. She raised her glass. To damaged goods. I clinked my glass against hers. To starting over. A month later, Jake convinced me to attend a larger fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. You need to get out more, he insisted. All you do is work and hike. Those are two perfectly respectable activities, I protested, but allowed myself to be dragged to the event anyway, with Sarah as my date. The evening was going well until I spotted Laura across the room. She was with a colleague from her school, looking composed and sober. When she saw me with Sarah, she froze momentarily, then nodded slightly and turned away. Is that her? Sarah asked, following my gaze. Yeah, she's pretty. She is, I agreed, because it was true. Does it bother you to see her? I considered the question seriously. Not anymore. It's more like seeing someone from a previous life. Sarah squeezed my hand. Good answer. Later, as we were getting drinks, Laura approached us, my body tensed, preparing for another scene, but she seemed calm. Mark, she said with a tight smile. Good to see you. You too, I replied cautiously. She turned to Sarah, extending her hand. I'm Laura. Mark and I used to be engaged. Sarah replied, shaking her hand without hesitation. I've heard a lot about you. All terrible, I'm sure. Laura's attempt at humor fell flat, but I appreciated the effort. Actually, no, Sarah said kindly. Just that things didn't work out. An awkward silence fell. Laura cleared her throat. Well, I just wanted to say hello, and she looked at me directly. I'm sorry for my behavior at the last event. It was inappropriate and embarrassing. It's forgotten, I said, meaning it. Thank you. She glanced between us. You two make a nice couple. Before I could respond, she walked away, back straight, head high. That was unexpected, Sarah commented. Very. Are you okay? I watched Laura rejoin her friend across the room, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Nostalgia, sadness, but mostly acceptance. Yeah, I am. My birthday rolled around in November, 7 months after the breakup with Laura. I'd planned a small gathering at my place, just a few friends, good food, nothing elaborate. Sarah had offered to help, arriving early with ingredients for her famous buffalo chicken dip and a bottle of my favorite bourbon. Where do you want these? She called from the kitchen, holding up party supplies. Wherever you think they look best, I answered, trusting her judgment in a way that felt both novel and right. The doorbell rang as I was setting up the grill on the back deck. Can you get that? I called to Sarah. It's probably Jake with the ice. A moment later, Sarah appeared in the doorway, her expression tight. It's not Jake, she said quietly. I turned to see Laura standing behind her, clutching a wrapped package and looking completely thrown by Sarah's presence. Laura, I said, surprise evident in my voice. What are you doing here? It's your birthday, she said, as if that explained everything. Her eyes darted between Sarah and me. I didn't realize you had company. I'm Sarah. Sarah extended her hand with professional courtesy, though her eyes had cooled considerably. Mark's girlfriend. The word hung in the air between us. We hadn't officially labeled what we were yet, but in that moment, I was grateful for her clarity. Laura's face fell slightly, but she recovered quickly. Nice to meet you. I'm Laura, an old friend. The revision of our history to old friend made me clench my jaw, but I let it pass. Did you need something specific, Laura? I just wanted to drop this off. She thrust the package toward me, and maybe talk for a minute, privately. Sarah glanced at me, then nodded slightly. I'll finish setting up inside, she said, giving my arm a gentle squeeze as she passed. Once we were alone on the deck, Laura's composure cracked. You're dating someone new? Already? It's been over half a year, I pointed out. And yes, Sarah and I have been seeing each other for a couple of months. A couple of months, she repeated, looking stunned. So right after I came to see you? No, I corrected her. Weeks after that. And frankly, it's not really your business anymore. She set the package down on the patio table with enough force that I wondered if it contained something breakable. I thought maybe with some time you might reconsider, that we could at least talk. Laura, we've been through this. There's nothing to reconsider. So that's it? 5 years together and you can just replace me that easily? The accusation sparked a flash of anger. Replace you? Is that what you think this is? What else am I supposed to think? I made one mistake. One ongoing mistake that lasted weeks and involved lying to my face repeatedly, I interrupted. And yes, I've moved on. That's what healthy people do after a relationship ends. With the first pretty nurse who came along, she said bitterly. Don't. My voice dropped dangerously low. Don't insult Sarah when you don't know the first thing about her or what she means to me. Laura's eyes filled with tears. I still love you, Mark. I miss you every day. I made a horrible mistake, and I'm paying for it now. Isn't that enough? This isn't about punishment, I said, softening slightly. It's about consequences. Actions have them. You chose Travis, and that choice had consequences, one of which is that we're no longer together. But he didn't choose me, she whispered. And there it was, the heart of the matter. She wasn't here because she'd realized I was her true love. She was here because her other option had fallen through. That's the problem, Laura. You're only here because he left. If he'd asked you to go to Atlanta, you would have gone. She didn't deny it, which was answer enough. I think you should leave before my guests arrive, I said gently. It would be awkward for everyone. Just take the gift, at least, she insisted. I spent a lot of time on it. I picked up the package, if only to speed her departure. Thank you. Goodbye, Laura. She lingered for a moment as if waiting for me to change my mind. When I didn't, she turned and walked slowly toward the side gate. Sarah emerged from the house once Laura's car had pulled away. You okay? She asked, studying my face. Yeah, I said and meant it. Actually, I am. Want to talk about it? I considered the wrapped package in my hands, then set it aside unopened. Not really. It's part of a closed chapter. She nodded, accepting this without pressing. Your friends will be here soon. Jake texted that he's bringing extra beer. I pulled her close, grateful for her steady presence. Thank you. For what? For being here. For being you. For not making me explain every little thing about my past. She smiled up at me. Your past is your business. I'm more interested in your present. She paused. And maybe your future, if that's not too presumptuous. I kissed her then, a promise in the gesture. Not presumptuous at all. Later that night, after the party had wound down and Sarah had fallen asleep in my bed, I found myself looking at the unopened gift from Laura. Curiosity finally won out, and I carefully removed the wrapping paper. Inside was a handcrafted photo album filled with pictures from our 5 years together. On the last page was a handwritten letter, detailing all the things she loved about me and all the reasons she regretted her choices. It was emotional, raw, and completely sincere, and it moved me not at all. I closed the album and placed it in a box in the back of my closet where it would likely remain untouched. Not because I was still angry or hurt, but because those memories belonged to a different life now, a life I had grieved and moved beyond. In the dim light from the hallway, I could see Sarah's outline under the covers, her breathing deep and even. I slipped back into bed beside her, feeling her instinctively curl toward me in her sleep. 6 months later, I sold the house. Sarah and I found a place closer to both our workplaces, with a view of the mountains and enough space for her books and my hiking gear. It wasn't perfect. The kitchen needed updating, the deck was weathered, but it was ours, a fresh start. Laura eventually moved to Charlotte for a new teaching position. The last I heard, she was dating someone new. When people asked me if I ever regretted how things ended, my answer was always the same. The only thing I regret is not ending it sooner.